Good afternoon from Sacred Space at Titania's Realm. It's 4:37 p.m. on the 4th of April 2025. Yes, I've decided to come back and finish off this book. I've got about another 2.5 hours, I believe. And let's just do this, babies. I've been out, had a bit of lunch, late lunch, and did a little bit of grocery shopping and bought my makeup and a few other bits and bobs. And yeah, I had a kind of a strange encounter. I went to BWS to buy myself an early birthday present of a bottle of Jack Daniels, which mainly gets, believe it or not, mainly gets used for offerings to the voodoo god Papa Legba. So I was quite bemused by that because I bought a litre bottle. It was on special, but it was still a bit expensive, and I thought, what's wrong with this picture? I'm feeding invisible entities and I don't get to enjoy it as much, but don't need it really. Don't need the alcohol to get through my life. Thank the goddess for that though. Truly, it could have been a lot worse. But anyway, I'm standing there waiting to pay for this bottle of Jack Daniels. And handsome young man, very young, old enough to be my grandson, seriously. Probably early 20s. Well, maybe not quite my grandson because my daughter's 39, but if she'd had a child at the age I had a child, which was 20 and a half, almost old enough to be my grandson. Anyway, the odd thing is looking at me really lovingly and like really searchingly, and I'm kind of ignoring it because he's a kid and he's working in a bottle-o, and I just want to pay for my grog and get the hell out of there. And so he's looking at me, and I'm all like a bit in a heightened emotional state still from reading angel stories on YouTube. And I've got my Deify t-shirt on that I've been wearing because I wore it yesterday, but it was still clean, so I wore it again today. And I had my big earrings with my pussycat, so he must have thought I looked unusual, and he's just looking at me and looking at me. And I'm thinking to myself, what the fuck, kid? Just charge me for the booze. He's looking at the bottle of Jack Daniels, probably thinking that's a big bottle of Jack Daniels, but anyway, it's only me feeling self-conscious about it. He probably didn't care about the Jack Daniels so much, but he was just staring at me. And then he says, just to make conversation, have you had a productive day? It was the way he said it. I could tell he was intelligent, that lad. And I looked at him and I said, sort of, kind of productive. I didn't want to tell him what I'd been doing all day. Maybe I should have, but, just, it was odd people are there. And then he looks at me again. He says, did you get much done? I was like, yeah, I did. I'm satisfied with what I've got done. And I said, I've gone out down the shops and got a few things I needed. And he said something else. I said something smart back, I can't remember. He said, I said, no, I said to him, that's right. I said, you're looking at me as though you're really intrigued. And he looks at me quite flirtatiously, this young lad. I don't know what's come over young men. It's a bit disturbing, but he wasn't threatening, but he was just a little bit flirtatious. And he said, looks at me and he says, yes, he said, well, that's because, he says, blushing slightly, I am intrigued. I said, oh, really? I said, yeah. Oh, well, that's good then, I said. He said, well, the customer before you didn't want to speak to me at all. And he said, I just saw you and thought, might have a bit of a chat. And I said, oh, yeah, there's no harm in that, love. And he's looking at me. And he says, yeah, because he said something along the lines of you need balance. And I said, well, you've got plenty of balance. You've gone from the unspoken to be overly talkative. Now you've got your balance. And he started to laugh too. Anyway, I paid for my grog and I sorted on out of there, but I thought he was a very unusual young man, mentioning balance and that the other customers had been frozen and not wanting to talk. And you know what? He's got a point there. I didn't want to go there with him because I was a bit triggered actually. I walked into that Mount Gravatt Plaza. Walked in there and I smiled at a few people. They all looked at me like frozen zombies at this. Like death masks. I thought, man, a bomb could go off in this place and you couldn't look any more dead than you already look. And so I thought, I'm not going to bother smiling at these people either. So I just did what I had to do, went to Woolies and got the things I needed and then decided I'll get myself an early birthday present. Buy myself a bottle of Jack Daniels. Why the hell not? It lasts a long time. I share it with the voodoo god, but I don't begrudge him his grog and he doesn't begrudge me mine. Kind of watch each other's backs, him and I. Well, him more watching my back than the other way around since he's a god and all. But anyway, it was so odd because I've been feeling guilty about having run out of Jack Daniels for the last week. I was like, I haven't made any offerings to Papa. Papa needs his offerings. And the way that young man was looking at me, it was almost as if Papa was in him going, what took you so long? And you had a productive day and where have you been? Needed my grog. Still haven't given it to him. The traditional days to make offerings to Papa Legbo are Saturday nights and Monday nights, so he can wait one more night. We'll make him wait. Please don't punish me, Papa, but I haven't opened the bottle myself. I'll have a little tipple and give him something too. We'll have a drink together. It was almost kind of that flavour. It's like, oh, you're finally here buying me the grog I need. But coming from that third party, this young man, I'm intrigued kind of thing. Anyway, it was sweet. He actually made my day, actually, because at least I looked at him, I felt like saying, at least you're alive in there. You're not just a ambulant fucking meat sack with no brains and no soul and just a NPC practically shuffling and drooling. Just shouldn't make fun of that because I used to shuffle and drool once upon a time. But even at my worst on the psychotropics, I was never an NPC. Never. I was alive inside there, somewhere buried deep. But it was horrible, I also went to Chemist Warehouse to buy, makeup and isocol, rubbing alcohol and witch hazel and other bits and bobs. Oh, spent a fair bit in there too, by the gods. But anyway, it's okay. I only buy things like that like once a year or so it's no biggie. Don't have to feel guilty about it. And I came out of there from paying at the checkout. The checkout lady was friendly. And all these people coming in at the door were all my vintage, and they all stared at me like this. Like they were just dead inside. And I'm like, trying to give them at least a courteous smile. After the third person, I thought, I'm not going to bother with you. You're all the walking dead. You're all the walking fucking dead. Oh, but there was another funny thing that happened in Woolworths. They were the walking dead in Woolworths too. I don't know what's happened to Brisbane, Queenslanders. It's quite astonishing. But anyway, I'm shuffling around there trying to find creamed corn to make soup with my chicken that I bought yesterday. And I'm looking everywhere and couldn't find the bloody aisle, up and down. It was driving me bats. And while I was looking for the aisle, I stood at the top of one of the aisles and there was a man, probably in his 40s. I don't know if he was on something, if he was drunk, if he was just mentally ill, but he was doing a little jig like a fucking leprechaun, dancing to some song. I can't even remember the song that was playing, the canned music. And I just looked at him and went, Because, I mean, I do crazy shit like that all the time, but not in the supermarket, you understand. But then I get triggered by supermarkets, so... Yeah. Anyway, so I step out. I didn't even go into that aisle, which I needed to go in, because turns out that's where the sweet corn and the cream corn was. I had to go past them a bit later. I was like, oh, Jesus. Oh, but Jesus, we're got a wee little leprechaun doing a little... And he was laughing and happy. And in a way I thought, God is blessed, the only person alive in this entire supermarket. And now I'm McJudgy. But anyway, it was funny because I stepped out initially out of that aisle. And there was this old Italian man walking towards me, also with a frozen face like this. And I come out and I'm just like... and laughing at the other fellow. And so this old guy just stared at me like this. Like he's never seen anyone laugh before. I was like, oh dear God, it was surreal. So I must admit, I was grateful for my young BWS serving person asking me if I'd had a productive day, which I have indeed had. It's going to get even more productive because I'm going to read you the last 2 chapters of this book, and then I will have completed this mission, and then I can move on to something else, whatever the something else might be. So on we go, people of Earth. I'm always grateful when I find people that's still alive inside their body, mind and spirit. That's all I've got to say about that. I mean, I almost wanted to hug and kiss the young BWS man because he was just so winsome and engaging and alive. Right, that tea's not quite right. It's a bit cold, but I can't tolerate it. I'll be back, people. I've got to give it a bit of a ring-a-ding-ding in the microwave. Ring-a-ding-ding, ka-ching, ka-ching, ring, ring, ring. Right, I'm back, people of Earth. And all I can say is there's angels in the architecture spinning infinity, and we say hallelujah. Just see what my camera's doing. Weird things again. Angels, spirit guides, and ghosts. Exactly how angels are related to the spirits of people who have died is a problem I discussed previously. It seems unlikely that people who die become angels. The bulk of evidence is against this view, as angels seem to be quite a different kind of entity than a spirit. Too much Red Bull, they've got their wings, am I right? Oh, please forgive me. But it's true. Anyway. Nonetheless, there are many accounts of angelic visitations from beyond the grave, and I received a lot of accounts that could be considered to be about spirits of the deceased rather than about angels. Like my father-in-law of blessed memory, who used to rock the heavy lazy boy chair that he loved and was clearly visiting us. Couldn't see him, but the chair rocked all by itself. Anyway, in some cases, the conviction of the teller that a departed friend or family member became an angel was sufficiently compelling that I thought it best to include the account and allow readers to decide for themselves what to think. I excluded those accounts that clearly seemed to be about ghosts and ghosts only. However, in a few cases, the spirits of the deceased seemed to be guided back to loved ones through the intervention of an angel. In deciding which accounts to include in this section, I have tried to select a variety that covers all aspects of the topic. This bloody thing is hurting today, really badly. Some days it really aches. It's odd, isn't it? Anyway. Annie, 34, Newcastle, England. When I was a kid, I spent a lot of time being looked after by my Aunt Rosie. She wasn't really my aunt. She was an old friend of my mother's who lived a few houses up the street. She was retired, but she still used to work as a cleaner. She would work early in the morning and then later, after the factory or office was closed. As a result, she was around in the daytime and used to look after me while my mother went to work. She did this when I was young and then kept on doing it in the school holidays after I went to school. Rosie died when I was 10. I wanted to go to the funeral, but everyone thought I was too young. I think my mother underestimated how strong our bond was. I still loved my mother, but I had spent so much time with Rosie. I loved her in the same kind of way. I spent the whole day crying, and it took me a while even to start getting over it. Rosie was the one adult I could talk to about absolutely anything. If I asked my mum about growing up or marriage or what happens after you die, she wouldn't know what to say. But Rosie would always just tell me what she thought and let me make my own mind up. When I was about 13, I was going through a difficult patch at school. My best friend had moved away to another school, and I was unhappy because I didn't really have any other close friends there. I felt very isolated. One night, I woke up in the night and went downstairs. There was a knock at the door, and when I opened it, there was Rosie with a woman standing behind her in the street. Rosie asked if she could come in, and I said of course she could. Then we sat down there in the front room and talked about everything that had happened to me since she died. It was lovely to see her again, and it made me feel a lot better. I don't remember what happened after that until my mother came down and found me curled up asleep on the front room floor. I couldn't really say if it was a dream or if it really happened, but I'd definitely gone downstairs in the night somehow. Maybe it was a kind of sleepwalking, but I feel like I really had seen Rosie. It's getting boiling hot in this corner again. Got the window open. Oh, good Jesus. This started happening regularly. It was almost like If I really needed to talk to someone, or if I was confused, Rosie would always come and have a chat with me. I used to wake up in funny places. Once I was asleep halfway up the stairs. My mum even put a safety gate on my door because she thought I was sleepwalking, but it didn't stop me. Every time Rosie came, there was the same woman with her. She arrived with her, then seemed to wait outside while Rosie talked to me. Then they would leave together. Once I asked Rosie who she was. She didn't really explain, but she said that the woman helped her come to see me. I believe that the woman was an angel. I'm very grateful because Rosie helped me a lot through those years. I haven't seen her now for a long time, but I have a feeling that if I ever really needed her, she might still come and talk to me. Holly, 30, Florida, USA. I met my grandmother with an angel once. She died when I was 6, so I don't remember her that well. But apparently I was a favourite of hers, and I used to stay with her often. I do remember playing with her and making houses out of cardboard boxes and pretending that cotton reels were little people living in the houses. And I remember being happy when I was with her. About 10 years ago, I was up very early and walking down on the beach. There was no one else around. Then I met 2 women walking the other way. They weren't old, perhaps in their 40s. One looked very much like the pictures I have seen of my grandmother when she was younger. They said hello, and I blurted out to this woman that she looked like my grandmother. She just laughed and asked if I remembered her kindly. I told her what I remembered. Then she asked me how I was and if I was happy. I told her about my life and how I was going to get married soon and what I was studying and where I worked. Silly things like that. But she wanted to know. Then she had to go. The other woman hardly spoke the whole time, but it was she that said they had to go. I asked the woman who looked like my grandmother if she really was my grandmother, and she just laughed again, but kindly. I asked her if she wasn't my grandmother, was she an angel? She just laughed again and said, no, but that maybe her friend was. And she said that maybe her friend had let her come to see me to check that I was happy. She put her hand on my shoulder and said how happy she was to see me all grown up. Then they walked off. It didn't even occur to me to walk after them. I just knew I couldn't. Later on, even I could hardly believe it had happened. But it really did. Norma, Oban, Scotland. My grandfather died when I was about 9 years old. He hadn't been ill. He died suddenly of a heart attack in the local betting shop one Saturday afternoon. We always went over to my grandmother and granddad's house for tea on Saturdays, and my grandmother would make these wonderful cakes. They lived on top of this hill, and you could see right down into the town from their front garden. I often used to go and swing on the gate, waiting for him to come home, so that I could at last have a piece of my grandmother's wonderful cake. On this particular day, I saw him walking up the hill about halfway up, but he wasn't alone. There was another man I didn't recognize walking with him, holding his arm as they walked. You could see how happy they were, laughing and joking, and I rushed inside to tell Grandma that he was on his way and that he had someone with him. She wasn't best pleased at this news and came outside saying, "Who on earth is he bringing here today?" But then she started telling me off because he wasn't anywhere in sight and I oughtn't to tell lies. I tried to protest that I had seen him, but no one believed me. About an hour later, his friend, who I always called Uncle Jimmy, came to tell Grandma that Granddad had had a heart attack in the betting shop and had died. Of course, this was a shock to everyone, and I felt very strange about it. I really had seen my granddad walking up the hill that evening. Maybe the granddad I'd seen laughing with his friend was already dead and was being accompanied to heaven by an angel. Whoever it was, they looked very happy. Ken, Madrid, Spain. I got lost in the mountains once. My car broke down on a high mountain road. Excuse me. It was very deserted up there, and rather than wait for another car, which could have taken all day, I decided to walk down to the nearest village. This involved walking down the hill rather than following the road, but somehow I was going the wrong way, and after a few hours I realized I was completely lost. I'd been following the sun, but the direction I was going in was wrong, and now I was hopelessly lost. It would be dark in a few hours, and I was getting a bit worried. At that point, I saw a white hawk hovering over me. It's a strange thing, but I felt like I had seen this bird before when I was young and always in difficult situations. Perhaps in dreams I had seen it. Now it seemed to be watching me. I decided to walk toward the bird as I didn't have any other ideas. The bird kept moving on over the hills, and I kept following it. After about half an hour, I came to the ridge of a hill, and there below me was the village. I'd been going in completely the wrong direction before I started following the hawk. I don't know if that really was a guide, but it is interesting that the idea came into my head that I should follow it. It doesn't really make sense unless the idea to follow it came from outside me somehow. John, 41, Georgia, USA. My spirit guide is an angel called Lua. I can tell when he's there because an immense feeling of peace and happiness comes over me and the hairs on my arms stand up. Lua acts as a kind of teacher in my life. When I am unsure how to act or need advice, he will be there and I can meditate on various problems with him. The advice he gives me comes straight into my mind from his. Most of the big decisions in my life about my work and my private life have been made after talking to Lua. I think we all have angels that are there to help and protect us, but you have to open your mind to them to be able to receive communications from them. Fran, 50, Durban, South Africa. I've been there to Durban. It was beautiful. 1973. It's a small town, but it was beautiful. After my mother died, I found it hard to come to terms with her departure. To start with, I didn't want to clear up her room and possessions, but after about a week, I decided I had to go and do it. On her mantelpiece was a china angel she had kept with her for many years. She called it her guardian angel, and she used to believe firmly that we are watched over by angels. I wasn't so sure then. She also told me many times that her mother came back to her sometimes as an angel. I used to find the idea a little bit scary when I was young. When I went into that room, I picked up the angel and thought about what my mother used to say, and a strange feeling came over me. There was a beautiful smell of flowers, honeysuckle or something similar, and it was as though the room was suddenly filled with the warmth of bright sunlight, even though nothing really changed outside. I realized that my mother was there in the room with me, even though I couldn't see her. It was an eerie feeling. I was covered in goosebumps, and I looked around and said hello to her. I could feel her smiling when I did that. I realized that if I needed her, she would be there for me. I might not be able to speak with her, but just knowing she is there is a great help. When I feel down or sad, I still pick up the angel and hold it in my hand, or I call out to my mother in my mind, and often the same thing happens. I know that she comes to me when I need her. I don't remember why I used to find the idea scary. Now I find it very comforting to know that the one person I could always count on is still there for me. Carla, South Carolina, USA. My older sister died when I was 13 and I was 9. She got hit by a truck on her way home from school one afternoon. They said she died instantly. The truck was speeding and they later found out that the driver had been drinking. He had his license revoked for a while, but he's probably still out there driving now, despite having killed a young girl. I'm convinced that she visits me as an angel whenever I get upset or stressed out about things. I miss not having a big sister to talk with about things. When I get upset, I tend to withdraw into myself and just feel bad rather than talk about it. There have been many times in my life, splitting up with boyfriends, college exams, my recent divorce, when I have felt bad and curled up on my own. After a while, something happens and I start to feel calmer. It's like I suddenly begin to believe I can cope. I know what I have to do to get back on track. It always starts with this warm, comforting feeling coming over me, and I feel less stressed. It's almost as if someone is holding my hand. I'm sure that someone is my sister, and she's become some sort of angel who protects me, like my guardian angel. I think she does it because she's my big sister and she never got the chance to do those things in real life. So she has returned as an angel to protect me. I feel so happy that she does. Derek, Melbourne, Australia. I never knew my grandfather because he died just before I was born. My mum always used to tell me what a lovely man he was and how he would have loved me had he met me. When I was about 5 years old, my mum, dad and brothers were in the kitchen getting lunch ready and I was in the living room sitting on the floor watching TV. Turned around suddenly and there was a man sitting on the sofa behind me. He was wearing a brown suit and was quite old with white hair. He told me that he loved me and would always look after me. My mum poked her head round the door and asked me who was I talking to. When I looked at the sofa, it was empty. The man had gone. I asked my mum where he had gone. She seemed puzzled and a bit anxious. She told me there was no one else at home. When I went into the dining room to have lunch, I saw the man again in a photograph on the piano. Mum said it was my grandfather, her dad. I have never seen him since, though I still like to think that he's my guardian angel, and I often talk to him about things when life gets a bit rough. Sarah, Liverpool, England. I'm sure I saw an angel when I was a little girl. My grandmother had died and she'd been laid out in her coffin in the front parlour. That's what they did in those days so that people could come and pay their respects. I'd never seen a dead body before, so I was half scared to death and half fascinated. I just went in with my mum and held her hand while I said my goodbyes. Later that night, while everyone was in the kitchen talking, I crept downstairs again and sneaked into the parlour. There was a woman standing next to her coffin. She didn't look like anyone who lived near us. I certainly hadn't ever seen her before. There was a kind of glow around her. It was beautiful. It made her look like something from another world. I watched from the door for a while, and she turned and smiled at me. And I just knew that she was an angel and that she'd come from my grandmother. I've always been so glad to have seen her. My grandmother was very special. Gertrude, Berlin, Germany. When I was a little girl, I was terrified of the dark. I hated waking up in the dark. Sometimes, when I did wake up, there was an old man sitting by my bed, talking to me quietly and smiling at me kindly. I could never hear what he was saying, but I could tell he meant well, and so it was comforting. I told my mother about this after I became a teenager. She asked me to describe him. When I did, she started to cry, told me that it was my grandfather, her father, who had died shortly before I was born. When she showed me a photograph of him, I was startled because it really was the same man. My mother said he loved to make up stories and that when she had been a little girl, he would often sit by her bed at night telling her the stories he made up. That must have been what he was doing for me too. Even though I couldn't hear them, it made me feel happy that he came back to tell them to me. Boris, Cornwall, England. My mother had this little terrier dog, Ben, which she loved so much. She had even left instructions on how to look after him should anything happen to her. She died suddenly in a car accident in 2002, and I followed her wishes and brought the dog to live with me. I remember going into the kitchen a year to the very day that Mum was killed and seeing Ben was just sitting on the kitchen floor, wagging his tail, looking so happy. In front of him, there seemed to be this kind of glow. It vanished almost immediately when I saw it. I think it was my mum, just checking on her beloved little dog. The experience left behind a kind of peaceful feeling, and I've known since that my mum is happy with how I'm looking after her dog. John, New York, USA. After my dad died when I was at college, I went through quite a bad time. I'd never really got along with him and felt that we'd never taken time to settle our differences before he died. He was disappointed that I'd chosen to study art history rather than medicine or law, and I felt he just wanted to show off to the neighbours about his professional son. Anyway, he died suddenly of a heart attack when he was 50, and it caught me completely off guard. One day, I was just lying on my bed, listening to music, when I felt really cold and the hairs on my arms stood on end. It felt like someone was sitting there holding my hand. I knew at that moment that it was all right, that my dad understood, and that our differences could finally be put to rest. After that day, I got on with my studies and became much happier again. Sherry, 35, New York, USA. Whenever I thought of angels when I was small, I pictured them the way everybody seems to. Tall and glowing, with wings and a halo. But now I think that they can appear exactly as they wish, and in whatever way suits their purpose. My angel was a big black Labrador with a worn leather collar, who had a disc attached that said Jack and an address on the other side of town. I'd been working at a small family-run Italian restaurant to help pay my way through college, and although there wasn't much money and the tips only just kept me alive, I enjoyed the time I spent there. The owner swore that he made the best spaghetti all'aglio e olio, that's pasta with oil and garlic to you, outside Naples. And he might just have been right. It tasted really good. But he wasn't such a nice guy in other ways. And one night he came on to me in the kitchen while his wife was with some customers out front. Can you believe that? She was right there in the building. I walked out the back door and never came back. But it was a really bad time for me for something like that to have happened, and I didn't know what I was going to do without the money, however bad the situation was. I went back to my apartment and sat down to try and figure out how I was going to make that month's rent. Then just gave up and got in my car. I drove up to a place on the edge of the woods that has a picnic area, and I sat down and looked at the sunset. It was late summer, and even though it was only about 8 in the evening, there was no one there but me. After I'd been there for a while, I noticed a big old black Labrador nosing his way through the litter near the parking area. After a bit, he made his way over to where I was sitting on the grass and sat down right next to me. I've never had a dog, so I was a little nervous, but he seemed so calm and nice that I stretched out my hand and rubbed his head. He leaned into my shoulder and seemed to like the attention that he was getting from me. I felt a warmth and companionship from him that I'd never gotten from another human being. That's when I looked at his name tag. "Hi Jack," I said. "You want to sit for a while?" That's what we did, me stroking his head and him leaning on me, and a real peace came over me. I didn't exactly forget the trouble I'd had in the restaurant and the way I'd been treated, but it seemed to fade away into the sunset. I knew I'd be all right. I don't know how long we sat there. It can't have been more than 15 minutes before I saw a woman over on the other side of the picnic area. She had white hair and was dressed in a jogging suit and looked to be maybe 50 or so. She waved at me and Jack and smiled. Then my Labrador friend got up and ran over to her. She waved again and pointed at my car. I looked, of course, and when I turned back, she had gone and so had the dog. The thing is, there wasn't another car around, and I couldn't see where she might have come from. I got back in my car and drove home feeling completely different from the way I'd been on the way up there. I checked the address that I'd remembered from Jack's tag, but it didn't seem to make sense as a real address. But I still felt better than I ever had, and I still thought, even after my bad night, that things would work out and that college would be okay, which it was. At this point, I don't know who was the angel, Jack or his owner, whom I never could find, but who I believe was sent to look after me on a not so nice evening, and who left me feeling better than I ever had. Maybe it was both of them. That seems about right to me. Adele, 30, Illinois, USA. I was at the wedding of my closest friend. They held it outside at her parents' house on a lovely Saturday in June. It was beautiful weather. I was really happy because the man my friend was marrying was exactly right for her. I've always liked her family, and there were a lot of people there that I was happy to see. It was just one of those wonderful days when everything comes together and you can't express how happy you are. As the bride and groom were about to say their vows, I saw 3 white birds fly down over their heads and settle on a tree which was behind the minister. They sat there very attentively, watching the people at the wedding. You know, the way birds cock their heads. I noticed them because white birds are not that common here, so I was wondering what kind of bird they could possibly be. I looked back up at them a few times as the service continued, and still they were watching. Then just as my friend said, "I do," and her new husband put the ring on her finger, the 3 birds rose up as one and flew straight over us all. I've told my friend that her wedding was blessed by angels. She's the happiest bride ever anyway, and it never does any harm to have some extra help, does it? Other angelic encounters. It's hard to clearly categorize every angelic encounter. This chapter is composed of various stories that I found interesting, but which didn't quite fit in with any of the other chapters. Some accounts I've included because the people who sent them to me truly believed their experiences were related to angels. Near-death experiences in particular seem to merit an entire book of their own, indeed. The accounts of near-death experiences that I have included here were selected because they involved angels, or the awareness of angels. Jamie, 43, Maryland, USA. I had a motorcycle crash a few years ago. A car came out of a side road without even looking and crashed into the side of me. I went over the edge of the road, over the pavement, and into a wall, at which point I came off the bike and was catapulted into a field. I hit my head pretty badly and did myself plenty of damage too. The driver did at least stop and make sure that someone called 911. In fact, I think he felt pretty bad about it. Anyway, I was knocked out cold and then woke up on a gurney being pushed down a corridor in a hospital somewhere. I was in terrible pain, and everything was distorted and weird. I saw that terrible white light over me. Pardon me. I knew immediately that I was dying and that I had to go to the light. But I didn't want to go. I was rising up above my body. For a moment the pain stopped and I could see myself on this gurney with doctors all around me. They had all kinds of instruments attached to me, and someone was holding my head and shouting. At that moment I actually felt calm because I knew that this way the pain wouldn't start again. Then I remembered my boyfriend and my family, and I didn't want to go. There was an angel there then. I don't know when she arrived, but she was beside me, looking down. All she said was, "You can go back if you want." I think we both knew there wasn't time to think about it. I had to either let go and keep going, or go back. I decided to go back, and then I was there again, on the gurney, looking up in all the same pain. It took me a while to recuperate, but the doctor said I'd nearly died, and I know for sure that they were right. Heike, Munich, Germany. I see heaven sometimes when I am half asleep. I'm not sure why. It's not a dream I have at night time. But sometimes in the afternoon or in the morning, I might be sitting in a chair, feeling a bit tired, and I will start to doze off, and that's when I see it. Perhaps it's because a lot of people I know have died. My brother died of cancer when he was young, and my mother killed herself a few years ago. 3 of my friends have died in the last 10 years as well. One of a drug overdose, one in an accident, and one from anorexia. I am no stranger to the dead in any case. It is like a beautiful warm light comes over me. People think that death must be a cold, bad place, but I realise that it is simply a better place. In the light I can make out faces, but it is not the people I know who have died. It is the faces of angels who are coming to greet me. There is a beautiful music I hear. It is full of the most beautiful harmonies and cadences. I am a musician, and I have tried many times to write down what I hear, but it is beyond human comprehension. It is as though there are notes that you have never heard before that harmonize more perfectly than anything you have ever imagined. If you can imagine seeing a completely new colour, different from anything you have ever seen, that is what it sounds like. So there is this beautiful music, and the angels come out to meet me, and I know that the people I know who have died are there, but I can't see them. I can't see them unless I die too, and I don't want to die. When the music stops and I am back in the light of normal day, I always feel very cold and a little bit sad. I have to go and sit in front of the heater with it turned up as high as possible to try to stay warm. It is as though I remember the warmth of heaven and can't deal with the normal temperature of the day around me. Then the moment passes and I warm up, and I just feel glad that I have been allowed this glimpse of something else, something that I will not be able to really experience until after I die. Anthony, 29, South Carolina, USA. I recently had an operation. It was just a routine one to remove a small growth, but I had to be unconscious, so they gave me a general anaesthetic. As I was started. Alright, I'll go with that. As I was started to go under, I looked around, and standing behind all the doctors and nurses who were around me, I could see bright shining lights and the faces of angels watching me. It was very clear and distinct. When I woke up after the operation, I saw them again, just for a moment. They were exactly how you would imagine angels to look. Bright, shining white light and beautiful human forms. Their eyes were silver or gold, and they had very beautiful faces. John 21, Nevada, USA. It's almost the Shabbat, Friday night, sun setting. Can almost feel the energy. Actually, it's a beautiful evening. Still grey clouds and threat of rain, but it was a good enough day today, I think, even though for some reason I got very emotional again. It's been a good day. Sometimes I wake up in the night and there are two angels standing at the end of my bed and two standing above my head. Excuse me. I remember a nursery rhyme book from when I was small. I don't remember the exact rhyme, but I remember the picture, which was of four angels in this arrangement. It was a dark blue and black picture, quite sombre, and the angels were actually bears. It was a book for small children. I know that must have made a deep impression on me, because I remember that picture, but I don't remember much else about the book. When the angels are there around my bed, I know that each of them has a particular role in my life. I can't exactly say what those roles are, but I know they are there for a reason. They're not bears, of course. They're like people, but I don't really see their faces. I see them standing there, but their faces are too high above me to be seen. I see their white wings glistening in the light. It's not an entirely comfortable dream, if it is a dream. I feel they may be judging me, and no matter how hard we try, there are always things in our life of which we are ashamed or uncertain. But I don't feel they are judging me too harshly. They are noting my sins without condemning me for them. Perhaps none of this really means anything, but it is a very vivid vision and something that makes me view life differently the next day. If angels are there recording my actions in some way, then surely it adds a greater weight to what I do. I think about it when I walk past a homeless person, or when I get angry at people around me for silly reasons. I won't swear that it always makes me a better person, but perhaps it makes me more conscious of my faults. Kelly, 65, Iowa, USA. I was with my mother when she died. She had been ill for quite some time, so it was not a great surprise to us. In fact, she had outdone the doctors, who kept giving us warnings that she might not last much longer, but she kept on going and giving the lie to their warnings. She amazed everyone with her fortitude and cheerful attitude toward the illness. I only hope that I have half the spirit to deal with adversity that she showed in her last months. The day she died was one of the few days I remember her saying anything less than positive. She told me she was feeling a bit weak and that she wasn't sure she was going to be there much longer. She told me not to worry if she died, and that she had left her will and instructions on the hall table. Of course she had told me this before, and I told her what I always did, that she was going to be around longer than me. But I was worried. I wanted to call the doctors, but she said they didn't know what they were doing and she couldn't be bothered with them. My brother was there with me that night after he came from work, and we sat with our mother upstairs watching a film on the television. Then we took turns reading to her from the book she had been reading. She didn't like reading herself, as it tired her, but she enjoyed having us read to her. I was happy to be able to do this for her when she had spent so long reading to me and teaching me to read when I was little. We finished the chapter and asked if she wanted another one, but she said no. She wanted to lie still for a while. We stayed with her, talking quietly, expecting her to fall asleep. Then she pointed up and said, "Look." We looked, and there was nothing there, so we asked what she was pointing at. "Can't you see them?" "The angels," she said. We told her we couldn't. Then she said, "No, I suppose you can't. Just me. But they're so lovely. I wish you could see them." She just lay there, staring up at them with a beautiful, calm expression on her face. My brother and I looked at each other, but he shrugged and we didn't want to talk in case we interrupted her reverie. Then she died. She just breathed out and didn't breathe back in again. It was that simple. We didn't try to revive her because both of us knew that it was natural and that she was dying in any case. In retrospect, I'm just happy that I was able to be there when she went, and also that she died looking so happy. Sakumi, 37, Tokyo, Japan. I was brought up believing in ghosts. I saw them often. In Japan it is believed that the spirits of your ancestors stay with you, and I often saw my grandparents after they died. Perhaps if you believe you can see them more easily when they come to visit. They would come, visit me in my bedroom, and once I saw them in the park. Once or twice I saw ghosts of people I didn't know, strangers in the street, or perhaps someone who had lived in our house a long time ago. I saw someone walking up the stairs when the house was empty when I was a teenager. None of this scared me, just seemed normal. Just once I had an experience that was quite different. A friend of mine was hit by a car and she was in the hospital in critical condition. I went to visit her a lot. She was in a coma for 2 days and no one was sure if she would survive. I was about 20 and I took my turn sitting with her, talking to her to try and bring her back. About 1 in the morning, I was the only one there with her, as her parents had gone home. I heard a terrible rushing noise, and the room became white with light. And there were two giant figures standing at the bottom of her bed. They were about 8 feet tall and very stern. I was frozen with fear in my chair, but they completely ignored me. They were there a while. It could have been a minute or 10 minutes. I couldn't tell. Then there was the rushing sound again, and they were gone. I had no idea what had happened. Perhaps my friend was close to death at that moment, and they came to observe or help. They weren't there for me, so there was no need for me to know anything. They definitely weren't ghosts, so I believe they were a different kind of spiritual being. I have noticed since I came to live in America that people don't believe in ghosts so easily. They find it quite strange when I talk about my grandparents, so I tend not to speak of these things. But the figures I saw in the hospital that night seemed to me to be more like angels than ghosts. I haven't seen anything like it since, and I would be quite terrified if I ever did again. But it is not fear because they mean any harm. It is just awe of something that is beyond anything that I can possibly comprehend. Isaac, 20, New York, USA. I often see angels when I am on the edge of sleep, just as I am about to fall asleep or just as I am waking up. I look around and see one or two angels in the room. Sometimes they are sitting in the chairs in the corner of the room. Sometimes they are standing next to the bed. They are looking at me, and they have kind faces. There is one in particular that I often see who has grey hair and a very rugged face. Perhaps he is my guardian angel. I smile when I see them, and they smile back. But it is at that half-awake moment when it is hard to speak. Then I either fall asleep, happy that they are there, or I wake up properly and they are gone. I think that there is a kind of altered state where you can see aspects of reality that would otherwise be hidden from you, and that's what happens to me on the edge of sleep. Alan, 38, London, England. I don't really know if I met a real angel or not, but I like to think I did. My wife and I visited Milan a couple of years ago. It was one of those cheap flights that you can book on the internet. My cleaning lady said something she's a bit psychic at times, but I know that's not going to happen. It's It's too late now, but it was odd. As she was leaving, after cleaning on Thursday, and I bid her goodbye, gave her my customary hug goodbye. She kind of stood and waited for. Well, I triggered her a bit. We were talking about ghost stories in Indonesia. Anyway, I said, just see you next week. And she said, Inshallah. And I said, Inshallah? No, Inshallah. Most definitely I will be seeing you next week. And then she turned her head slightly and she said, well, you could be in New Zealand next week, Inshallah. She wasn't being sarcastic, it was just this look that came over her. And it's funny, because some cheap airfares came up and I was like, if I didn't have to give 6 weeks notice to Centrelink before I leave the fucking country, I would have booked a plane and gone. Just see my friend Lynn in New Zealand. Even though I don't have a lot of money, I would have gone. But anyway, it was just so strange how she said, you might not be here. You might be in New Zealand. When she left, I kind of freaked out a bit. I thought, am I going to die? Crazy thought to have that too, because I'm perfectly healthy at the moment. Well, not perfect, but I'm travelling okay. Anyway, I wonder what made her think that I would be going to New Zealand. Anyway, I'll be seeing her on Thursday as per normal. Mama T's not going anywhere. Alan 38, London, England. I don't really know if I met a real angel or not, but I like to think I did. My wife and I visited Milan I read that already. We decided one weekend that we deserved a few days away, and the next weekend we were there. I love that spontaneity. If I had money, I would be spontaneously just going anywhere in the world I wanted to go. But I don't. So I can only spontaneously combust in my chair being a psychedelic dreamer. But anyway. We walked around and looked at the cathedral, which is huge, and the arcade that leads onto the cathedral piazza, and had a very nice time. We wanted to see Da Vinci's The Last Supper, but the queues were too long and it was staggeringly hot. So we went to a cafe and had some cold drinks instead. The only other place that I wanted to see never seemed to be open, but we thought it was worth one more visit, just to check. It was an ossuary, which is, at least in Milan, a chapel where all the inside decoration is made out of people's bones. It sounds a bit gruesome, but I'd read about it somewhere and I really wanted to see what it was like. The bones apparently had come from an old graveyard that had been dug up in the 17th century to make way for another church, and had all been taken to this existing chapel for safekeeping. I can't remember the name of it, and I can't find my guidebook, but if you ever go, it's just behind the big cathedral, down a little side road. As I said, we tried to get in several times before and failed, but the sign on the front had said, almost the Shabbat. I've had a thought going through my mind, something's been at me, go and sit in a chapel, and I said, I can't, I'm not Catholic. Well, it wouldn't preclude me from sitting in a chapel, but it'd be a bit weird since I'm Jewish. That's all I've got to say about that. And then something just said at 5:55 p.m. exactly. Could have gone to shul in the city, but I think they start at 5:30 or some hour like that. Anyway, had an urge to go to Margaret Street Synagogue, which I have not had an urge to go there for many, many years. And this religious urge that's riding through me at the moment is because Passover's coming next week on the evening of the 12th, Saturday the 12th. Is it Saturday? I think so. My birthday. So there's kind of this spiritual innovating going, go and pray somewhere in a holy place, even a Catholic chapel, if that's all that's accessible to you, Tanya Aarons. But I'm sitting here in sacred space in my garden, and I could also just sit and talk to the fairy folks if I wanted to, or my angels. So I wonder why I'm being encouraged to go and sit in someone else's sanctuary and talk to God there. It's a bit unusual. Right, where were we? I interrupted that mid-sentence. As I said, we tried to get in several times before and failed. That's probably what made me think of that, because the synagogue's often locked. You can't just go and sit in there and pray anytime you like, and it's difficult. But the sign on the front had said it was open this afternoon at 3 o'clock. It was just after that, so we went to have one more try. But when we got there, it was closed again. We were just about to leave when a very small, very old man came from nowhere, seemingly, and spoke to us in Italian. I didn't understand, but it gradually became clear that he had the keys and that he'd be very pleased to let us in. Well, it was just beautiful and not gruesome at all. It was completely decorated with the bones of long dead people, but they were arranged in patterns and crucifixes and stretched from the floor to the highest point of the walls. The little Italian man stayed with us long enough to tell us to look at what he called the angles in the sky. The angles turned out to be a fabulously painted, domed ceiling to the chapel, which showed a vast array of angels, all in golden clothing with wings, shimmering in a deep blue sky. The only other thing he said was that the people whose bones were at the top of all the walls were lucky because they were closer to the angels in the sky, and that the angels were the luckiest of all because they were the closest to heaven. He was a lovely man. When we had spent a long time in that wonderful building, I looked for him to thank him for appearing just when we were about to give up, but he'd gone. I like to think that he too was an angel. He certainly seemed to be close to heaven. I like that one. Martin, Vermont, USA. When we were teenagers, we used to love playing in the snow in the winter. We used to slide down hills on pieces of wood or tin trays stolen from our houses. But their mother was not all that happy about that, mind you, baking trays. Kids, you got to laugh. Late one winter afternoon, we were about to have our final sleigh ride when this bright glowing light appeared, glinting on the snow. We all stopped in our tracks and just stared at the glowing snow. We weren't afraid or anything, even though the light was strange, like nothing we'd ever seen before. It felt kindly and warm. It was like a glowing and friendly warmth which warmed all of us, then just disappeared as quickly and mysteriously as it had appeared. We checked the newspaper and the TV news in the following days, but there was no mention of any lights in the sky or anything. I'm convinced it was an angel, because it made us all feel so cosy and warm and safe. That's how an angel should make you feel, although I have heard UFO or UAP reports that sometimes they appear as an orb or a glowing light, and they make you feel comfortable and warm and safe too. So it's possible that what they saw wasn't strictly an angel but a UAP. Just had to ruin that a little bit for you all, but, well, I believe in those too. Sean, 27, Maryland, USA. Are there 3 stars in the sky yet? It's hard to see because of the clouds. Anyway, good Shabbos. Shabbat Shalom to my Jewish viewers and audience and subscribers. Sean wrote, I was in the local park on New Year's Day last year. I have to tell you, I'd been behaving pretty atrociously. Over Christmas, after a party, I'd been unfaithful to my long-term girlfriend. Just a casual, stupid thing. But I knew that she would be really upset if I told her, and I didn't know if I should tell her or what to do. I mean, was it just selfish to tell her and get the guilt off my chest, or was it even worse, to try and keep it a secret? And while I've been worrying about all this, I'd been drinking too much and had a big drunken fight with my roommate, so he wasn't talking to me. Everything seemed bad and I knew it was my fault. No excuses. So I was in the park, looking at the geese on the pond, just walking around, trying to think things through, very anxious and upset, not really facing up to things. It was really cold and misty, so cold your breath was in clouds around you. And then I felt this breath on my face, like someone very warm was breathing right up close to me. And there was a hand on my shoulder. There was no one there, but I really did feel it. What it was like was someone who couldn't help, because there was nothing that could make the situation right. But the most they could do was let me know that they were there for me, like a really close friend might do if you've totally screwed up, if you're lucky. But it was more than that too. I felt myself calm right down, all the way through me. I got warmer and less agitated. I started to think straight. Instead of looking for people to blame, I started to think about exactly what had happened and why. I was pretty sure it was an angel who helped me face up to things there. They couldn't fix it all for me, but I did try my best to honestly face up to my own mistakes after that. I apologised to my roommate, and even though I ended up splitting up with the girl, I was straight with her and let her know exactly how I felt. How I see it is this: you can't avoid making mistakes in life, but sometimes you need a bit of help in being strong enough to admit to them and work out where to go next. Luke 34, Wales. I used to play guitar in a band. We were on stage one day at a sound check when the bassist got electrocuted. Basically, his amplifier was short-circuiting, and when he put one hand on the bass strings and one on the microphone, he was completing a circuit and the current went through him. Oh, that's awful. Dear Goddess. Jesus. For a moment, we didn't know what had happened. He gave a kind of strangled shout, and then he was falling about on the stage. For a moment, we just thought he was messing about, but he hit the singer, and for a moment, he got a shock too. The singer started shouting, "Plugs!" and we all got the message. I pulled one set of plugs out of the wall, the wrong ones. But, luckily, the keyboard player found the right one and yanked it out. The whole thing only took about 5 to 10 seconds, but it all seemed to happen in slow motion. Afterward, the bass player had a burned patch on his finger where it had been in contact with the strings, and his heart was quite jumpy. We cancelled the gig. There was nothing else for it. We wanted him to go to the hospital for a checkup. Electricity can do strange things to you that you don't realise. But he refused. He just wanted to go outside and sit down. In fact, he'd have played the gig even, but his gear was too dangerous to use again, and we were all shaken up by it. It would have been stupid to take the risk. I went out to talk to him about it, meaning to have one more go at getting him to go to the emergency room. It was a mild, sunny evening, and we sat on this wall outside the bar where the gig was supposed to be. He was looking all round him as though things looked strange. I asked him if he was okay, and he told me that while he had been being electrocuted, he had seen angels all around him. I said it sounded like a hallucination, or did he think he was going to die? He said no, that hadn't even crossed his mind. It was like the illusion we see every day had fallen away, and he had realised that there were angels all around us, standing there, talking to each other, watching us. They had stopped to watch him, and he had still been able to see them after we switched the current off, smiling at him now that he was okay. But then they had slowly faded. He said that was why he had been so impatient with us when we were talking about the hospital and all that. It was like we were breaking the spell, and all the while this vision he'd had of the angels around us was fading until he couldn't see them at all. Now he wanted to just walk home quietly while it was still fresh in his mind. And he set off in the wrong direction to walk home, still looking all around him. I've always remembered that image, the idea that behind what we see, there is actually another reality where the angels are just going about their business and keeping an eye on what happens in our world. I'm not sure if it was a hallucination on his part or real, but there is something very appealing about the thought anyway. Susan, Cape Town, South Africa. I've been to Cape Town too. I've been 2 days in Cape Town and 2 days in Durban because when we went to Germany, the Fair Star, and came back on the LMS, those were the 2 stopovers each way. My grandmother had a stroke when she was 79. Can you believe that that was almost 52 years ago? Wow. Cape Towns are beautiful, the Table Mountains and the bay. It's a beautiful city. Anyway, sorry, distracted here by Cape Town. My grandmother had a stroke when she was 79. It made her paralysed from the waist down, and we'd had to put her in a nursing home because she could no longer look after herself. It upset the whole family to have to do this, but we knew we had no choice. Our homes were not adapted, for wheelchairs, and my father, mother and brother all have full-time jobs, as do I. She was unhappy after the stroke. She had always loved gardening and walking, just being outdoors really. Whenever we visited, and someone visited every day, she was up and down in terms of her mood. She often got very depressed, and it was distressing to see someone you loved being so down. She died after being in the home nearly 2 years, which is about average. Those waiting rooms of death. Dear goddess. I was the first person the staff contacted, and I went straight there. When I went into my grandmother's room, she was lying on the bed, and all around her there seemed to be this glowing light. Oh, excuse me. Oh, I don't know what brought that on. Right, people there. It's got bones in it, brought tears to my eyes. Dear goddess. maybe Rati's right. I'll be in New Zealand by next week. Babies. No, I won't. I don't know where I'll be next week, but it's not likely to be New Zealand. I stood back and watched as the glowing light gradually faded. It wasn't frightening. Excuse me. I'd say it was more comforting than anything else. Oh, the goddess. Why have I gone off? I went over to my grandmother's bedside and she had a smile on her face. It was lovely to see that after seeing her so depressed, even though we were all tremendously upset after her death, I think the light was the angels taking her soul to heaven. Afterward. It's impossible for us to know in our normal lives what heaven or the afterlife might be like, but we can have direct knowledge of angels. Because angels are able to cross between the physical world and the world of pure spirit. They may be the most direct experience we can have of the sphere of divinity. It seems clear that humans often need a helping hand. We can be weak, cruel, unaware, and selfish. But also, with or without a helping hand, we can be brave, kind, and selfless. Perhaps this is why the angels love us enough to intervene or to bring us messages. They see our faults. They also see our potential. I think they love children best of all because children are innocent of the sins and weaknesses that afflict us in later life. But it seems that angels are also willing to give even the weakest of us a second chance. Sometimes they save us when we don't seem to deserve saving. Other times, they show us the way out of the problems we have created for ourselves. In many of the stories recounted here, the humanity and decency of ordinary human beings in extraordinary situations shines through strongly, like the drug addict or petty criminal who musters the strength to realize his sins and turn his life around, or people who have lost their loved ones and have had to face up to their own faults in reacting to these tragedies, or those who have shown bravery in the face of violence, evil, or misfortune. From all of these accounts, we can draw strength and a renewed faith in our fellow residents of planet Earth. The fact that people believe in angels also seems to be an expression of our essential goodness. We have enough comprehension of good and evil to recognise goodness in all situations. People are, sadly, not always able to stay on the path of goodness, and they stray into weak or evil acts. But it is that spark of goodness with which we are born that can always lead us back into the light. Angels can always see that spark of goodness, and for that reason, our connection to angels is of the greatest importance in our everyday lives. I have always believed in angels, but now I feel their presence on a daily basis. I have heard and seen enough to convince me that they are always with us, and I don't need any overt signs or messages from them to believe that they are here to watch over us. I like to think that belief gives me even more reason to live my life in a way that would please the angels. I hope that you have found this book an inspiration. It's been a great pleasure to compile it, and I am grateful for the opportunity to act as an intermediary and to bring you these accounts. Angels are with us, whether we believe in them or not. But the more we believe in them, the more likely we are to recognize them when we encounter them. I hope and trust that the next time an angel crosses your path, you will recognize that beautiful being and be open to the angel's positive influence in your life. Amen. The Salah. I threw that in the end. But the end, people of Earth. The end. Right. She's also written a book, Dear God, Children's Letters to God from Around the World. Got a very old copy of that that's still from my childhood it's delightful. It's so philosophical and wise, out of the mouths of babes, am I right? I might read, that might be the next book I read to you. I might read that to you because it's sweet and heartfelt, but also at times cynical and philosophical and a bit odd how kids perceive God. Well, it is what it is, people of Earth. Anyway, have a beautiful evening wherever you are in the space-time continuum. It's Friday night, and my normal practice is to go dancing on Friday nights. So I just received a message from my beautiful Lynn wishing me a wonderful evening. She forgot that I've already told her that I'm coming to see her tomorrow before I go dancing tomorrow, and she's clearly forgotten, but that's okay. She'll remember that I'm coming to see her tomorrow, hopefully. So I'll be out tomorrow evening for my weekend revelries and mosh and wildness and enjoyment in life. So as always, Goddess bless people of Earth, the Holy One in all manifestations, angels, fae, people with pure, loving, heartfelt intentions. interdimensionals of love, light and truth and holiness, however it manifests, people of Earth. Just nod politely and show respect and honour and be surprised who you might meet. Have a beautiful weekend and evening, and as always, take good care and be of good cheer. Love you all, bye.